Pull up a chair and buckle up. It's the Original Strength podcast.
Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in to this week's edition of the Original Strength podcast. I have a special guest this week, Sifu Slim, author, speaker, and coach, author of The Aging Athlete. Sifu, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Tim, I'm so happy to be here. I'm coming to you live with a tan, even though I'm from Southern California right now. The cold weather is there and people aren't getting as much sun, shortened days, those kinds of things. Seasonal affective disorder, SAD. So instead of being there typically in the winter, I am in a warm climate. And right now I am in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, where the high today will be 84 degrees.
Oh, well, 84 sounds nice. I am in North Carolina, where today I think we're going to hit 40, 41 maybe. Hey, you're doing twice as good.
So you're going to be out there. If you're running, you're going to have a balaclava on your head, or if it's not windy, you may not need that.
No, it's not windy. And I'd be for the cold exposure, I guess. But you lost me at running, so I'm not going to be outside running. Um, so, Sifu, tell us a little bit about your story, who you are, and how you became the author of and the expert in The Aging Athlete.
So interestingly enough, as a young kid growing up in New Jersey, cold winters and hot and humid summers, I watched Muhammad Ali as a young man. I watched Bruce Lee films, and I looked at these people and I thought about what they were doing, and I liked all of the heightened parts of the emotions that they brought people together, that they were able to transform people's way of thinking, of doing things. They were going for high performance in most of what they'd done, what they were doing. And then what I learned along the way is that if you go for high performance and you focus on that, it can be your detriment. I think high performance is good. So you have these people who want to peak at the Olympics, who want to peak at Wimbledon, who want to peak in their Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competition or their foot race. But the main thing we have in this long life of ours, whether we're going to live till 70 something or 105, is a body, a mind, and a spirit. And sustaining those for a long life and having them function at an optimal level takes some doing. And so my first website that I shouldn't have been able to get in 2008 was called maintenanceworkout.com. So imagine that. I mean, you would think that that would have been gone in that late of a time. You know, the internet's already been out about 14 or so years at this time. And why was this available? And it shouldn't have been. So I thought about that and I said, I need to bring a message of maintenance, of joy in movement, of balance, of recreation, of paying it forward, so that you take a young person, a 6-year-old person who loves to run, and you teach them about not clobbering themselves and kill the guy with the ball and in football, and going for the gusto or you're slide tackling in soccer. You teach them about, yes, there are some times where you're going to go for the gold, go for the gusto, but what about this idea of maintaining your mind, body, and spirit on a regular basis? And that was the point of my first book, Sedentary Nation: show people how to maintain themselves. Along the way, somebody told me that there's a syndrome called the aging athlete syndrome. Athletes are falling apart, doesn't matter what age they are. And you ought to bring in your message of balance to these athletes. And so that's what I did. And I wound up writing these 2 books concurrently while having 3 jobs. So that was one of the more challenging things I've done with my life, Tim.
Wow. So how, all right. So, oh man, I want to talk to you about both of them. So how do you build and balance the mind, body, and spirit?
Well, first of all, you shouldn't like pain. So
That makes sense.
the idea of the no pain, no gain, which I believe is from the 70s, which was my pivotal junior high school and high school. I graduated high school in 1981 in rural New Jersey. I'm looking at this message and a lot of my coaches about, penalizing the body and running hills if you didn't do well or if you didn't do what they told you in practice. And there's all this penalizing. There's none of this. Take a step back and think about it, be circumspect, etc., and look at what you're doing. So if you like pain and you're constantly getting things like injections, even in my high school days, there were people on my football team and the basketball team that I didn't play on, but I played on the football team. They were getting injections of cortisone and other injections and the anti-inflammatories. I didn't hear the word ibuprofen in the late 70s, but there were other things like aspirin. Advil was out. I'm sure ibuprofen was out. I just didn't see it. And so people were trying to put Band-Aids on the root of the problem. The root of the problem was you're doing too much damage, you're not recovering, and you don't know how to recover, and you're not giving your body enough rest. There's recovery, there's rest, and there's all these therapeutic things like massage, hot, cold, relaxation, movement therapy. There's all these wonderful things that are part of the healing process, whether you're just doing normal fitness or whether you're doing something that's damaging your body. You have to know, if you're going to be a sustainable human, you have to know about the healing process, the restorative process, and the aids you can use in order to heal your body.
So I'm guessing I believe the answer I know, but you can tell me more. How does the health of the body help with the health of the soul?
So here's the thing, and there's a cumulative effect. I was training with high performance boxers in the early 1990s. In my early 30s, I was a professional mascot, a dancing man in a costume at the time, and I had a lot of aerobic fitness, a lot of movement fitness, and I wanted to do a workout video where we showcase the boxer's workout, which is an incredible melding of agility, speed, power, deflection, and defense, and endurance. So you have all these wonderful things. And when I asked these people about the knockout, which I didn't know a lot about, but I knew I had studied Bruce Lee and Muhammad Ali and other boxers and martial artists, I knew that there was a cumulative effect. That was the typical way of most knockouts. The Mike Tyson 1-2 punch wasn't most knockouts. Muhammad Ali, it was usually wearing people down. And then you hit them once they were undefended, 3 or 4 in a row, and then they went down. That's the typical way of most knockouts. Same thing goes for the body. If you look at the body and you look at the sustainability idea, you have this idea of a cumulative effect. So you can do the right things cumulatively, and you can do the wrong things cumulatively. And this is where the mind comes in, and the soul and the spirit. If you're taking your body down and you're fatiguing the mind with all this blood has to leave the repairing and the neurological processes that are working in the brain, including getting rid of alcohol. A lot of that stuff happens in the brain. The blood leaves there, goes down into the body, and then it's working on repairing. It helps the excretion process, all these wonderful things. Now you say, how's the mind and the spirit and the soul? They're part of this fatigue syndrome. If you're overdoing these things externally to the body and internally to the body, and the soul is part of our makeup, there's the aura, there's all these things. If you're continuously in this fatigue syndrome, in this recovery syndrome, your spirit can shut down. It takes energy to have that open heart, the open mind, and this spiritual awakening. It takes energy to do that. So if you're depleting the body's resources, Tim, of all those things, how are you going to do that? So that's one of the starting points. I'd say you have to be in a point where you're recovered in order to take on the new day. So today was a new day for me. I got up and I did a lot of therapeutic exercise. I did staff acupressure, which instead of the elbow, like the physical therapist or massage therapist, I take a long staff that's about shoulder height. I put a towel over it. The other end of that staff goes against a tree, goes against a wall or some stairs, and I stick that into the myofascial release points to provide therapy for my body so that it can realign itself, it can heal itself, and it can release that myofascial, those trigger points. So then I can see how my body's doing and assess it, and then get into this movement where I'm going to be doing some therapy, some invigoration, some postural alignment, and then some building. So push-ups, chin-ups, squats, these types of things. So Tim, I had to take that on myself. And the older you get, and you may see this already, the older you get, the more therapeutic exercise you do, and that all relates to mind, body, and spirit.
So basically, keep your body healthy, light, and mobile and feeling good so that you can have a better chance of keeping your soul and spirit healthy, light, mobile, and feeling good.
I agree with what you said, Tim, exactly.
Awesome. All right. So you talk about the aging athlete and why this might be an easy question or not, but why do athletes age, or why do people age? And is it simply because they circle the sun a certain number of times?
Yes, aging process hits all of us. And I think one of the things that we should learn about as young people is this idea that we're not invincible. So I'm dealing with a torn meniscus right now, which is very common with athletes, and it's very common with people who don't use their body appropriately. We all have different biomechanical deficiencies. Even Bo Jackson, the great athlete from the 80s and the 90s, he's about my age. Even somebody with that incredible build, incredible agility, they have biomechanical deficiencies. And then when you become a normal human and you're doing lots of standing, lots of sitting, that builds on this portion of your life, which is degeneration, decrepitude, all of these things. Too much sitting, too much standing, too much high impact, too much repetitive stress, all these things. And it's very hard to do everything correctly, especially when we're these human beings in these long, elongated bodies where we don't have four legs to stand on with all this stability, right? So you deal with this as a human being. And now the aging process is also telling you that besides your musculoskeletal structure, you're also having cellular aging, right? And you throw in contaminants from the air, water, food, and thought, right? And negative energy, bad vibrations from the planet or from other people. And all of this stuff impacts us at all kinds of levels, and we have to navigate that. And all of this is part of the aging process. Now, if you can laugh your way through, and I mentioned Bruce Lee and Muhammad Ali before, these were very humorous people. If you watch Muhammad Ali's talk about, how fast his punch was, and then he tells somebody to put their hand up, and he says, hold that hand up, and I'm going to hit you so fast, right? And I'm going to hit you 3 times before you can move your hand. So, and he says, okay, I want you to say go. And the guy says, go. And Muhammad Ali doesn't move. And he says, you want to see it again? So he didn't throw a punch. That's the joke. But this is the idea. You got to be humorous and be lighthearted. And that will help you navigate the challenging thing that is called the life and the process of living and the process of aging.
That was awesome. So I got a good quote from you. Laugh your way through. To me, that was golden right there.
I think being on a team where you're with other people, even if you're in a running group where you're all at different speeds, if you can laugh during your warm-up, during the course, setting up where we're going to go on the course today. If you see someone that's to stop to tie their laces, get a drink, and you pass people, keeping it lighthearted, even if it's just with a wink, acknowledging that other person as you're cruising by, that human dynamic energy is wonderful. It can be supportive. It can be a way to assess yourself because other people can see what you're doing better than you can see what you're doing because they're watching you from the outside. All those things, Tim, I think are helpful. And then laughing along the way. Running with Euphoria, which is this idea, it's a Greek word that means health. And so Euphoria in ancient Greece was this feeling of well-being, mind, body, and spirit, karma, planet, tribal, all these things. This is wonderful stuff. So euphoria, not just taking a substance and getting high, because the substance could give you an incredible downer when that substance leaves your body, and you can do things, Tim, that are detrimental to you and others while you're on that high. Use this idea of being in this clean body with a high vibration, getting your posture aligned, getting your endorphins going, getting all your biochemistry going, and then achieving some beautiful piece of balance during your day. And that euphoria, I think, will breed the loose neck, the laughter, the lightheartedness. And this ethos is wonderful, Tim. And maybe you can tell me if you've experienced this, in a major way one time in your life as a young person, or even more recently, where you felt that, and there was, you could say that there was no better high, no better group high, human dynamic energy than that.
Oh yeah, no, I've been there. My problem with being there is when you're not there, you're like, well, how do I get back? So it's like you're in the kingdom of heaven, and then you're like, well, that was nice. How do I get back in? And like, what's the secret handshake to make that happen again?
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, Tim. So I am a person who's a deep digger, and I'm sure in your studies you've spent countless time, whether it was weeks, years, on one specific subject or on multiple subjects, where you're doing what's commonly called the deep dive on these subjects. Sigmund Freud in Vienna did that with psychiatry, psychology. Bruce Lee did it with many things. Philosophy would be number one on the list of my study of Bruce Lee, the thing that he did the deepest dive on. Muhammad Ali, it would have been humans' treatment of other humans, and what is fairness all about. That would be my idea of the thing that he dove the deepest on. And for me, the list is very, very long. Since I haven't had a family of my own, haven't had kids, haven't had pets since I was in high school, I was able to spend a significant amount of parts of each day doing this thing called deep diving and doing research. And then the other thing you have to do with research, I believe, is you have to test it. I always said that what helped me in my writing is talking to people who are smarter than me, better writers than I am, experts in their field more than I am, and attempting to achieve their level and surpass them. Maybe I couldn't surpass them on volume of information, but in terms of open-mindedness and open-heartedness to receive contrary points of view, I think if I would rank myself on something that I was world-class, it would be in that field. And that's the hardest thing in the world. When you do this deep dive, you think you know what you're talking about, Tim, and then you have to refute a lot of that information, because there's a new vein of wisdom that is presented to you, maybe even almost violently, like in a disagreement with someone who you're arguing with, you're having a debate with, right? You have to look at that and go, my gosh, I'm holding on to this information, this thought energy too closely. What am I doing that for? Where's the fear? And letting in this new vein of wisdom and testing it to see if it works. Oh my gosh. So if you don't do that each and every day, then you are closed-minded. And that's where you get into this thing of being what I would call a fear-based person. This new information, you see it in a fear response and it's aggressive response, rather than saying, let me work that in as this guru, Sifu, open-minded, enlightened person, or awakened person on the path to enlightenment. Instead of being, I'm a PhD in this subject and I'm going to dive into only Freud or only in art. I'm only going to study the Impressionists, and I'm not going to open myself up to street art of the 1980s and 90s and see what this movement was all about. I think you have to allow things to come into your circle and test them and see where that leads you. And that leads to, in my opinion, being open-minded. And it's a great thing on the way to awakening and then enlightenment. And that's where you can become in that zone, in that flow zone, in that spiritual zone, living as a spiritual person in this human body, in this human experience. Then the soul, you're living for that soul, and you're not as much worried about your shoulder tear as you are concerned about being this open-hearted spiritual person.
That was really good. I got questions off of that. Do you think, Sifu, that fear accelerates the aging process?
No question, no question. And it's a normal response. So why are we all in this fear zone? It's because when there's a time of lack, when you're lacking things, fear, scarcity, and lack. That's where we operate from in the unconscious mind and the unconscious mind. How many people do we know that are out there opening up their hearts and mind and just hugging people, no matter how horrible the stench of another human is or what their condition is? We don't want to catch something that the other person has. So I don't want people to catch things. It's almost like the idea of walking on hot coals. There's a chemical and a physical property that allows us to do it, but you certainly have to be open-minded in order to experience that the way that activity is designed to do. So to remove the fear, it's quite a challenge. And I can't say that I wake up every day in a flow zone. I know that the practice that I do has a high rate of success at allowing me to meld and balance out mind, body, spirit, and karma, and everything you want to put in that chart. But I know that if things creep in, like a fight with a significant other, or self-doubt, or criticism, or all of these things, or the inability to get good food and water, which can sometimes happen if you're in a place where all you can get is chlorinated water or water in a plastic bottle, so the plastic is giving us a form of toxicity to our system, and the chlorine is giving us another piece of toxicity. So you have all these challenges in life, and some of these are called first world problems because people in the third world are saying, some of the people are saying, I need any water, whether it's in plastic, whether it's got chlorine, whether it has a protozoa, whatever. I need some water because I'm dying of thirst right now. We are, we're dehydrated and we're dying of thirst. So all of these things are fascinating things. When I push that all to the side, I say that the number one thing to allow me to live in the flow zone would be to be lighthearted. And as soon as you're lighthearted, look what happens to your neck. It goes hopefully into better posture, the neck back, head back posture. And it allows your chest, you take the head back, and what happens to your chest and your abdomen? It opens up. And if you open that up, you can open up your heart, you can open up your spirit, you can open up your aura, you can allow other people in there. And if you're in sales and you're out there and you're closed down, who's going to walk in? What customer is going to walk in? But if you open that up with integrity, with honesty, with helpfulness, then you're going to get business because that business is going to respond to that. And that's something I think we need to do throughout the day. And we need to have daily mantras, daily checks, and daily pieces of the movement of mind, body, and spirit, where we can get back into that zone and laugh our way with euphoria through all of those different pieces of reminders, helpful reminders.
So what you're saying is being euphoric and lighthearted is more of, it's a choice but it's not a reaction. It's not something that happens to you. It's something you choose to happen with.
I would say, Tim, that the practice of your mind, body, and spirit practice, and this is the big differential between the 60s and 70s living, which is this work, family, everything's in a box. Yes, you can be open-hearted and show love, you can show caringness, but the idea of, and you know, you had the religion in the 60s and 70s in the Western world attempting to provide a foundation for this type of thing. But when different cultures brought yoga, meditation, open-heartedness, body positions that were very different, like yoga, Pilates, Alexander technique, martial arts, Qigong, Tai Chi. When you bring that in and you close off the mouth and you close off information overload, which the Bible is, come on. I mean, these books, the book to understand the Bible, you know, that they give you if you go to a Bible study is this big. And I can't think of the word right now. Do you remember the word that I'm looking for? I'll think of it, but it's a book that allows you to understand the Bible. So there's all of this information and thought and schooling that goes into just understanding one book that's been around for hundreds of years. If you incorporate having a teacher, and the teacher is allowing you to move through positions and meditative responses and allowing you to take an accounting of your biochemistry, of your fear, of your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, done with this ancient knowledge that's been around, like martial arts and yoga, for thousands of years, and they incorporate movement into that. I think that's something that we needed to have happen in America and in Europe in this in the 60s and 70s, and has continued to grow now in 2020s, this new millennium era. And so I think that will keep growing because it's paying benefits, and people with this information overload are gravitating to more of the closed mouth approach to the sensory experience that is part of the makeup of some of those daily practices that I just mentioned.
So you also mentioned like maybe you had a shoulder issue or a knee issue, like your meniscus. How can and let how being lighthearted, you forget about it. Can that help with the healing process of the shoulder or the knee?
Well, let's take a look at the shoulder. So I try to use intuition. I shouldn't say even try. I allow intuition to expose itself to me, Tim, and I embrace it. Intuition, it can't always be right. So that's the thing. If somebody has a strong propensity to have intuition work, thankfully I do, then you have a high striking ratio of your intuition working for you and allowing that to do it. Ages ago, when I was 6, I realized that these hanging exercises on tree limbs, on branches, on bars, on rope, on gymnastics, rings, all of these things, I realized that this monkey type of movement was very helpful for us. Back to the shoulder, Dr. Lynch, I just got an email from, wrote a book within the last 10 years about hanging and its benefits to the shoulder. The shoulder biomechanics and structure changes when you're doing all of this hanging. So look up the videos on Dr. Lynch, who's a Vietnam veteran. So he would be in his late 70s right now. That I made a mistake. It's not Dr. Lynch. It's Dr. John Kirsch, Kirsch, Kirsch Institute. He's the author and an MD on the book on the shoulder and hanging. Look him up and other videos related to that. So that's just one thing. Then look at the spine. And for for most people, that hanging and doing hanging exercises like knee ups and back extension, if you don't have any problems that are hurt by compressing the spine during back extensions, all of these things can be very helpful to you. And the sky's the limit on hanging for most people. The more you do it, the better. You build up grip strength. You can do chin-ups and pull-ups. You can do incline where your legs come up. You can do press-ups. There's all these wonderful things you can do, chimp-type exercises on the hanging, and they also will help heal the structure of your shoulder. Over the meniscus, you want to unload weight off of the knee joint. You don't want to compress it. So doing a lot of jumping exercise, a lot of squat, knee extension exercises in a fitness center, those things compress and put weight on the joint. You don't want to do that. You could look up Dr. Middaugh, Middaughh, El Paso, doctor of physical therapy. He's about 40-ish right now. I've learned a lot. I've done a deep dive on the meniscus and on the spine, on the lumbar spine, because I have problems right now in both of those areas. So I'm doing these deep dives, and it will continue. And I'm hoping to stave off surgery as long as I can, because the surgeries for both of those things have been proven not very conclusive to be helpful in high percentages of those surgeries. Now, at a certain point, it might be necessary, but for right now, I'm trying to stave that off for as long as I can. Over to you, Tim.
No, that's great information. So you, with your knee yourself, I know you had written something about working with your therapist and stuff, and you mentioned that it's inconclusive whether or not surgery helps for meniscus or healing on its own is just as effective. Is that where you're leaning to and where you're going right now?
Yeah, I think there are different schools of thought. And of course, 20 some years ago, most people would have gone in for some sort of meniscus therapy. And we've been able to see the results over that time. A good percentage of those people, and you can look it up, say percentage of the people who over 20 years that had some meniscus surgery done, what is their likelihood of needing a total knee replacement 20 years later? And you'll see a high incidence of total knee replacement in that group. Then you can look up the statistics on functionality of the knee joint and ability to do hiking, tennis, other sports with that meniscus surgery. And you'll also see a high incidence of people who had the meniscus surgery that return to their sport only to damage it further. So you have the results now at the current time. And of course, you're going to be able to see the modern technology, different types of therapy that they're doing. Prolotherapy, which has been out a good few decades, platelet-rich plasma, stem cell therapy. I'm not saying any of those are showing positive results. That's for you to look up and find good sources of information, which is not very easy to find because most surgeries cost a lot of, most research studies cost a lot of money. So you're really dealing with case studies of people who are doctors who are doing those types of injections. The injections, if you're not doing surgery, have to be you have to have physical therapy incorporated into that, and low inflammatory diet. There's all these things that you have to do, proper footwear, proper walking techniques and posture, and low stress. You got to do everything right in order to see what I would call realistic results. You can't just go in and get a surgery and say that's going to fix everything. You got to do the pre-surgery and the therapeutic stuff. Like when they do surgeries now, they're doing a lot of things like platelet-rich plasma while they're doing surgery, and stem cell while they're doing surgery and afterwards, to allow that healing process to begin at the same time and after surgery. So we'll see more on this as time goes, which is fascinating stuff, and hopefully we'll be able to use technology to reward ourselves.
Sifu, I think what I'm also hearing you say is that if you have an issue, not to put your health and the fate of your health or body in the hands of a physician, but also put it in your hands and learn about your condition and research it yourself and advocate for your own health as well.
I think both points of view on that are valid. So on my website, there's a part where there's a gentleman speaking. Go to theagingathlete.com or maintenanceworkout.com, same website, and you'll see in there, you'll see a person who works in the technology field whose wife had cancer. So what he did with his very busy schedule is he put the care of his wife into the hands, and this video was probably 12, 15 years ago, into the hands of the team of people that were connected to the radiation oncologist and the surgical oncologist, the cancer doctors that he was dealing with. And that's one point of view. And that, for this person, during the time when he was speaking about it, I think it was a TED Talk, he's saying that was the path he chose, and they put their faith into it. They opened up their hearts and mind to that approach, and that, he said, was something that gave them solace, that gave them peace of mind, and they worked that program, which I don't have a problem with that approach, right? If it works, and the doctors are doing the best, and they know the statistics on that particular intervention, I think that's great. The problem is, if you listen to your doctor 20 years ago about meniscus therapy or laminectomy therapy for the lumbar, you would have removed things that were very needed. If you did the laminectomy surgery in the 1990s and they removed fat pieces of your facet or entire parts, the entire facet from the back of your spine, you would have weakened the structure. Therefore, you would have needed to go back in within a week, within a year, or within 5 years for a surgery where they're doing a fusion surgery, and now they use a thing called a cage that they go in there. Now you've got 2 surgeries, and once you do the cage, you may need further things with all these bolts. They put the screws in there, and let's say the screws don't do what they want, or the screws weren't long enough, or they need a longer cage to connect to a few different discs. You open up a huge can of worms. Now, I'm not saying the doctors 20, 30 years ago knew the detriments to doing that, but they learned over time what the mistakes were, and so they were able to reevaluate that and do things differently. So when the information is not out, long-term side effects of the COVID vaccines, and most people, I don't know what the percentage of people, I would guess it's higher than 88% in the United States, got multiple COVID vaccines without knowing long-term side effects. You're putting your faith into something that wasn't tested over long-term periods. And so that's where I think intuition and a very balanced person, or going to someone like me to see a coach or a guru or an open-minded person, a naturopath, somebody who's looking at this thing with more like the witch doctor of the tribal people that look at this energy of this thought of this treatment that's coming in, this new treatment, right? They're looking at holistically. They're looking at with information. They're looking at it like a fusion as a structural thing and going, let me see, if I take a tree and I have to remove part of it, and I'm going to go to that tree and I'm going to replace part of it, is the tree going to be weaker? Now, we can't replace parts of trees with something that is a structural thing unless it is concrete. Sometimes when they remove a limb and there's this big hole, they fill in, damage in a tree done by pests, termites and things. They'll just put concrete in there, seal it up, and that tree does get some structural support. But you have to look at this thing in terms of a structural way, a holistic way, and see what your thought is on the durability of something like a laminectomy and a fusion surgery over the course of time. And then you also have to factor in, you don't sit properly. You know that you're a person who slouches, who's 120 pounds overweight, doesn't do exercises, doesn't do hanging. You have to look at all this and say, do I want to buy 2 years? Do I want to buy 10 years? Do I want to buy a little bit of time on this life, even though it's going to break down over time? You have to evaluate using all of this information and your propensities to see if this type of thing is right for you. And it's a very challenging decision, Tim.
That does sound like it takes a lot of thought and everything, like, right? Like, you got to have a good team. You got to have good information. You got to be able to, if you're going to take it on yourself to research it, you got to know where to research. So it sounds like one of the best things you could do is find a person like yourself. So how does somebody find you? Like, where would they go to work with you?
So if somebody wanted to, they just go on my website, sifuslim.com is the one where I do more thinking on guru type stuff. Sifu is the father, teacher, master. Bruce Lee was Sifu Bruce. So I'm Sifu Slim. I try to poke fun at the fact that I've been a person who's done so much fitness throughout my life, but I'm still in this Gilligan, Michael Jackson body. I'm just kind of a pumped up version of Gilligan, right? And but in a lighthearted way, in a movement way, I have these sessions with people, and I try to get them out of the fear zone, open up the heart, open up the mind, and share their story, share what they're going through, share what's holding them back from getting them where they want to go. And then I also have an 8-page form, which is, if you ever have been to a physician or dentist, they usually give you every year it seems to get a little bit longer. So I have one I developed years ago. That's about 8 pages. And as I go through the student, I call them, because I do it more like a Chinese martial artist master type of a therapy. So it's master and student. Even though I'm doing a lot of fitness, wellness, and life coaching, I'm trying to do it in a way that is more like the accepting father teacher, so that you come in either on Zoom or in person, and we go through these questions on this form. And so I'm a good typist, so I'm typing your answers to these questions. And that at the end of our 2 or 3 hours, those 8 pages become 12 to 14. And then I have a time away from that student. And then I type in more things over the course of the next week. And that student gets to pick, when I come back with that information, which is like a chapter of their life on paper. So 20 to 30 pages of stuff with lots of links to videos I want them to watch, and books I want them to read, thoughts and mantras I want them to consider. And then we look at those places where they rank themselves in terms of doing well and not doing so well. So low would be not doing so well, high would be doing really well. So on 0 to 10, we look at the ones that are where they are from 0 to 4, and we pick out 3 of those things. Maybe it's posture, maybe it's diet, maybe it's negative thoughts, maybe it's hurting themselves, maybe it's not sticking up for themselves in relationships or being fair to others, not being communicative, all those things that we can think about, not doing a daily practice, right? So we look at those things, and they pick out of those lists of things where they're deficient in. The first month or two, we're going to be working on those top 3 things they consider the places that they need to work on the most, and the ones that they are willing to work on the most. So we're going to combine those 2 things. And then we have this accountability and this ongoing assessment. So if I walk off the planet in week 5 or in the 2nd year, and this ongoing living document that's once they've signed the form, it comes to them, and it's a Google document that they can be adding things to. So instead of a chapter of their life, they have a book of their life, and they have this as a resource going forward. And then they can summarize that. So when they meet a new person that they're coaching in their own life at work, or they're having a relationship with, like a husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend or whatever, they'll have this as a resource so that they can take pieces out of this, put it in this new document for their business relationship or their significant other relationship, so they can work on an accountability type thing and a goal type thing with their person who's in this other relationship than the coach and coachee that I'm doing with them. And I think this accountability is so helpful because we repeat patterns, and our weak areas tend to need constant work throughout our lives, including posture. Like, I would say that I was born with posture that needed a lot of stability, a lot of structural support. Am I ever going to master that? No, because I was born with things out of balance. So I'm constantly going to be doing things that are structurally supportive and reinforcing. And even as I say that, I have to get my neck back, because as I get excited, I'm using, the stronger pieces of my anatomy to get into this little discussion instead of relaxing, being lighthearted, and getting back into the neck and head back posture that is such an important part of my structural being.
Awesome. So I'm going to put your website and information in the notes of the show for anyone that wants to reach out to you and work with you. Do you have time for one more question?
Sure.
Do you like peanut butter?
Do I like being what?
Peanut butter. Do you like peanut
Oh,
butter?
I do love it, and I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to have on to bring some more fat and protein into your diet in a very easy way. So I do love it.
Creamy or crunchy?
This one's crunchy.
Right on. All right. So last question, because now you got me curious. Do you have a second favorite nut butter?
Almond butter.
All right. Seafood.
I gotta give you a question.
Yeah. Okay.
Before we wrap.
Yeah.
So tell me how you coach people and get them to be in the flow zone, whether you use humor or whether you use deep listening skills, whether you open up your heart and just let the love pour out. And so that's the first question. How do you interact with people and get them to understand where you're coming from? And then secondly, if you wouldn't mind, Tim, tell me how you handle challenging people who are in the rat race and maybe closed down and maybe giving you a hard time in terms of being fully integrated in your program and ready to go and cognizant of the integrity of what you're trying to do together.
Oh, well, I think the approach for both of those two categories or people would be the same. I try to listen where they're coming from, and then I try to meet them where they're at by having them experience how their body is designed to move and change and heal itself. And often I am able to do this with a person within minutes at the speed of their own nervous system. And so if a person comes to me, maybe they're scared or they're fearful that they'll always be stuck with whatever their situation or limitation is. If in 5 minutes I can show them that their body does not think that that is the case, then they have to wrestle with what they thought they knew and what their body just showed them. And now it creates this chance for an open mind and an open heart. And if they come to me and they're just in a horrible funk or mood, same thing. If I can get to them to experience the power in their own body and how it can change how they feel, just by maybe it's helping them remember how they're designed to breathe. Maybe it's helping them. Like a lot of times people are just in a funk because they're stuck. They feel like they're trapped in their body because it's holding all this tension and fear in their muscles, and they're getting all tight and they can't breathe. And well, if you're holding fear, you're going to be in your sympathetic state anyway. So what if you could interrupt that in an instant and put them in their parasympathetic state and allow their notions or their thoughts or their emotions to drop into a better, lighter, brighter state? Then they have to wrestle with that. So whether either case, whether they're just in a funk and a bad mood, or they think they're stuck, it's so much fun to share their own design with them and let them experience it for themselves. And that way I don't have to convince them of anything. I don't have to say anything. I get to stand back and watch them discover how their body's designed, but also that whatever they thought they were dealing with may not be the case, that there may be an alternative. So I guess basically is I try to help people experience hope.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Now go, press reset, and then get outside and play.